What is something you have recently struggled with? A decision of whether or not to invite certain relatives to your vacation spot, a decision of whether or not to have that discussion with your sister about where mom should live now, a decision of public school or homeschool, a decision of staying or leaving a relationship. Each of these decisions has an element of fear and an element of love in the process of making the decision. Welcome to Calm in the Chaos. Now, if you've followed God Talks for any length of time, you've probably heard me say that with any situation, I feel we have two paths of choice, the path of fear and the path of love. For me, to sustain that belief, I have to define love and fear. I believe that making a decision out of love can have many faces. Sometimes love wears the look of concern, sometimes the look of strength. Sometimes love can look like a pretty harsh thing when I love someone enough to let them dislike me. Fear can look like anger and it can look like submission. Fear can wear the face of distance and isolation, and fear can look like violence. We humans have many ways of responding to external stimuli, but when distilled, they always seem to come down to fear and love for me. Now, I admit it may be oversimplification, but those are my two choices when faced with a dilemma. When I presented a difficult situation once to a therapist, God rest your soul, Joan, she answered with the question, "What are you afraid of?" And I was confused at the time. I had not identified that I was afraid of anything. I was angry that another person had caused me great professional pain. But Joan knew better. Anger was my response, but at the time, I was fearful of being judged, fearful of what I would have to go through to protect my professional reputation, and fear of the repercussions to my family and close friends. I stepped back, centered my heart, and figured out that my fear was driving me. I had to allow some time to process the whole event, but eventually love won out. Now, I have since encountered the person who caused me pain, looked them in the eye, offered my forgiveness, and asked if we could move forward without darkness looming between us whenever we met in the grocery store from now on. Today, in this God Talk, I'm tackling the fear side of the decision making. Now, a phrase that recently showed up in my readings is this: the strongest woman in the room is the one who makes everyone else stop being afraid. How does that work? Is this about leadership or simply presence or what? So I reached back in my many volumes of life experiences and found examples that I think can teach us something about moving forward in a fear-based climate. And I'll base my next comments on those experiences in my mind. I believe the term strongest refers to an inner quality of unshakable knowing that no matter what happens to us or for us, we will be all right. We may not have the luxuries we have now. We may not have the same family structure or friends around us, but relying on the deepest peace possible allows us to know all will be well in the end. There are so many examples throughout history that show us this knowing, and I'm going to start with Julian of Norwich, sometimes called Saint Julian, even though she has never been formally canonized by the Catholic Church. She wrote this now famous line in her text called Revelations of Divine Love. And it says, "All shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." Julian had been stricken gravely ill and during that time experienced visions of Jesus. You see, she was living during what was called the Black Death, and it was May of the year 1373. Now, I'm sure she felt, as many of us felt during 2020, that she was going to succumb to the illness and die, but she didn't. And rather than being a flippant phrase of, yeah, everything's going to be okay, it'll be all right, her phrase has the deep spiritual meaning that she knew, not just believed, not thought, but knew that God's love would win in the end for her. Even if she died, she knew that she would be in the loving arms of a God who would end all suffering. Now, believing in that same God may not be the point. How do we build a strong inner strength that allows us to know we'll be all right? Maybe that God is your answer. The strength of a global view and a cosmic view, that's what we want, that things will turn out as they should. Western culture has removed some of our strength by outsourcing knowledge to other people, to pharmacies, to physicians, to food producers. And we have become a little bit more shallow in our self knowledge, in that which was innate to us. And that was our strength to carry on. Now, please know that I am thankful that there are physicians who know more than I do, and pharmaceuticals that can cure diseases, and there are other people to raise the food I cannot produce myself. But we've gone a little overboard. We've given away opportunities to build that knowledge in ourselves that empowers us to know that we'll be all right. We've even outsourced some of our soul's growth by building empires of evangelical churches where we're asked to agree to the interpretation of the Bible that's being projected by the authority in front of the room without our ever doing research on our own, research of the academic kind and research of the quiet solitude, listening to our inner voices of reason, conscience, and hearing the voice of ancient wisdom kind. It might be a good time to remind ourselves that the directives, fear not and do not fear, appear many times in the Quran as Allah assures his believers they will be all right during times of danger. Buddhist teaching reminds us that fear comes from being attached to specific outcomes, what we want, and not what the world needs, perhaps. And we don't accept what is in front of us. Fear is not to be fostered because nothing is permanent anyway, our Buddhist neighbors teach us. The Jewish Torah teaches us that we must not fear, for there is no danger worse than fear. Of course, this lines up with President Roosevelt's famous quote, to lift the spirits of a nation during the Great Depression. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Fear not appears 365 times in the Christian Bible, a daily dose, if you will. Returning to the initial phrase about being the strongest person in the room, I have to say I believe that it has to do with a personal soul awareness, but there's more. She cannot sit still in a corner and knit either. Her presence must exude that personal inner strength, not in a take charge bossy way, but in a calm, nothing can bother me, I know what I'm doing way. And that is where we come to the last part of the process. When she became the strongest person in the room, was she still as scared as the rest of the people? Yes, she was. But fear did not drive her into cowering in a corner or crying into her sleeve. She was afraid, like Julian in 1373, but she opened the vault of her deepest knowing and pulled out the strength of all shall be well. And she did what needed to be done. If we are neurospicy types, people who are highly sensitive, empaths, and other folks who react heavily to external stimuli, we may need to recover quietly later. But in that moment, we can all be the strongest woman in the room if we are fully grounded in our own spiritual knowledge. Who do you call on in an emergency? I don't mean your brother in law, I mean spiritually. And what does your prayer sound like? Is it a plea to fix the situation? As in, please don't let so and so have a broken arm. Please fix the cancer. Please let me get that job. Or is it a request for strength to face the future with calm dignity and grace, no matter what the future holds? Making others afraid so a leader can advance his power is a tactic right out of the book called The Art of War. And since we are all in this planet together, I think we need more women to be the strongest one in the room. Let's try to not fall into the fear side of daily news watching. Let's spend more time in personal growth. What if each one of us was a bit less fearful and took steps to becoming the strongest woman so the rest of the planet's people could be less afraid? Blessings on all.